Kublai Khan is the mightiest man the world has ever seen. Not to pay him homage will cost you your head.
Pray then, what am I supposed to do, sir?
Pull to open.
Pull to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
They are evil spirits, sorcerers, magicians. Why? Because their words are unfamiliar to our ears?
I think it's fab.
Fab? What is that, Susan? Well, it's, means...
Here come the drums!
Here come the drums.
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open, the ongoing quest to make our way through the Gobi Desert that is the 300 plus stories of the TV show known as Doctor Who. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and yes, we have been wandering throughout the Doctor's time stream. Like a couple of people on the Silk Road to Cathay.
That's right.
And getting there through various random cities and adventures along the way.
Right, and passing through some Xanadu's of stories and some Xanadon'ts.
Occasionally having our plans thwarted by schedules and whatnot, but we're eventually get stolen.
There. Yeah,
it happens.
Sometimes the randomizer gets stolen by a passing caravan.
Yeah, but Chris and I, we're a couple of writers, couple of journalists. We are big fans of the show, and we bounce around the entire canon of the TV series, talking about various episodes, including one today that might include some of the things we just talked about. But
we may be dropping heavy references. Let's take a look at where we've been. We were so Time Lord heavy for a long time, and 3 stories ago, that tradition continued with The Doctor's Wife, featuring Time Lords and very, very TARDIS heavy kick that the randomizer's been on. 2 stories ago, we rocketed forward to a story where the TARDIS is stolen, the Saranga conundrum in Jodie Whittaker's era, and that was perhaps a Xanadont. We then, the randomizer then gave us the war games as our assignment, and we understood the assignment. We understood that it needed some serious time to research. So we took a couple of short trips, one focusing on the trouble with Gallifrey, and particularly the Time Lords who were introduced in the War Games, hiving off a little bit of that discussion. We also took a short trip on rage-quitting Doctor Who, which produced some very interesting and spirited discussion on our social media. And then it was finally time to do it. We finally tackled the War Games. We made our way through. Pete, I think it was our longest podcast ever. Is that correct?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. It's up there.
It's up there.
It's the Viscount banger of length for Pull to Open. But yeah, that was a lot. Well, 10 episodes. It's room to stretch out.
We really, good thing we did hive off the Time Lords. Anyway, after that, we asked for respite, and the randomizer said, no, you shall not have respite. You shall have, the randomizer said, going Old Testament, a 7-episode trip across ancient Cathay / China, across the Gobi Desert, across the Silk Road. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow travelers on the Silk Road, we've made it to Marco Polo, episode 4 of all of Doctor Who.
Well, Serial 4.
Serial 4, sorry.
Yeah. Huh.
Episode 4 would be the singing... Roof of the World. Sorry. Anyway, we're back in the era where they all had episode titles, so
right.
They are very never more evocative than they are here.
It's a fourth story, and I think arguably the first pure historical. I would say. I guess technically, like An Unearthly Child was the first, it's prehistory, so I don't think it counts, right?
Yeah, An Unearthly Child, 10,000, I can never remember if it's 10,000 or 100,000 BC, but
yeah, I think it's 100,000.
Technically, it is a historical, but it's so much of the show is focused on the TARDIS and the creation of the first TARDIS team that it's not, there's too much science fiction elements.
I think it disqualifies on account of being prehistory, so this is the first historical episode.
Yeah, as opposed to the first prehistorical. You're absolutely right. And it's very interesting when you look at where the historicals went. Doctor Who is about to go 3 for 3 in non-European history in a couple of stories' time when they go to the Aztecs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, here we are in China. Here we are with Doctor Who's very first racially sensitive casting, along with a lot of racially insensitive casting. But, the first person of color to appear and have a speaking role in Doctor Who is right here.
We're going to get into all of it in a little bit, but folks,
we're also going to get into the hashish. I'm just going to throw that out there. I believe, Pete, we have a bingo on Doctor Who stories that mention forms of cannabis.
Oh, really?
This would be it. Unless you can think of anything else, I think we've got a bingo.
I think they met up at 420 at some point.
Hey!
Guys, if you're just here for the commentary on Marco Polo, go ahead and check the show notes right now. And there will be very prominently in those notes a note on the time code on where we begin that commentary with, of course, our signature segment called TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch, Too Long Doctor Who, where we summarize the episode in record time. It's right there in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, scroll down. It's right there below the video, the same note. And go ahead and fast forward. But for everybody else, it is time to enter the Pull to Open feedback loop, where we talk about all of the discussion and fun that we're having on social media and other places around the show.
Yes, we talk about the historical that is Pull to Open.
Exactly. And historically, guys, reviews have been a great way to support your favorite podcast. It's just part of history. It's a thing that it's a fixed point. You can't change reviews. Whatever your political point of view, this is a nonpartisan issue. Everyone agrees reviews are a good way to support your favorite podcast. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead, guys. Go to the Apple Podcast app. That's a great place to do it. For whatever app you're in, if there's a reviews feature, please use it. Spotify listeners, you guys can rate the show at the very least in your mobile app. Go ahead and give it a star rating. I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm seeing lots of lights. Oh, wait, there's 5 lights. There are 5 lights. They could be stars. I think they're stars. For some reason, that just occurred to me. But that's a great way to do it. Also, for you super fans out there, you know it. You know what we like. We like those Doctor Who episode titles in the form of emojis. Like, why don't you go ahead, give us one of those? That's all you need to leave. That's all you need to leave. In addition to the star rating, go ahead. Yeah.
And in a bonus of that is you get to torture me every week. This is, you can press one button to keep torturing the whale, as in Chris, who has to guess the Whomojis.
In something we like to call the Whomoji Challenge. And we're going to get right into that right now, because we have a couple more from a fan of the show, Dalton1963. He left us these on Twitter, actually, at Pull to Open 63 on Twitter. Great place to leave comments and emoji titles. And I'm giving you one. I'm not giving you any hints on this one, actually. This is going to be so good. Are you ready for the Emoji Challenge?
I'm ready.
All right, so here we go. Single emoji.
Oh, shit.
Okay. It is the monkey with the hands in front of its eyes.
Oh, is it? Is it Blink? That could be blinking.
It's not Blink, but good try.
Is it Listen?
It is not Listen, but good try.
Oh God! Don't. Can you hear me? God,
let me know if you want a hint.
Yes, please.
You're correct. Your instincts are right in that is it a single word title.
Oh, why are all single word titles fleeing from my brain right now? Why can I only remember Invasion of the Dinosaurs and the longest possible episode titles? Pyramid at the End of the World. No. Gosh. I've done Blink. I've done Listen. I've done. Oh God, what other single word titles? Midnight. We've done that already. It wouldn't be Midnight again. Gridlock. We've done that already. I can only think of.
Do you want another hint that's going to narrow it down?
Yeah.
All right. This might give it away.
Yeah. Please.
11th Doctor.
Oh God. Why are all 11th Doctor names fleeing from my head right now? Oh, this may not narrow it down. Okay,
here we go. Third hint.
Yeah. Yes.
If you are, say, an animal, whether it's a monkey or otherwise, and you are shading your eyes by possibly or burying your head down, what do you think you're doing as that animal?
Oh, hide. You're hiding. Oh God! It's that one. I never watch it. It's the one in the house, right? It's the
hide.
The horrible one in the mystery house that I just like.
Horrible though. I don't know. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. All I know that is my prejudice around hide is that I just hide it in my brain, as you just witnessed, because I never choose. I hate horror. I thought that was a bland episode at best, as I remember. Barely watched it the first time. Definitely never watched it the second time. Sorry, fans of Hyde. Sorry, Matt Smith. Sorry, Dalton.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that counts as getting it after 3 hints or just not getting it. So I think that's basically the same. Well, we're going to call that, I guess, a fail on the emoji channels. It's okay, though.
See what you can do, listener. If you enjoyed my angst over the last few minutes, you too can create that in me. I'm offering it. I'm being a sadomasochist here on the show. Go ahead and whip me with an episode title that I'm not going to get. Because you know what? With 300 story titles in Doctor Who history, 300 plus, it's a tough challenge for anyone.
It's a hugely tough challenge, and I sympathize with you every week. I don't secretly, celebrate and gleefully chuckle to myself afterward as I cut the video.
I see those sips of champagne off screen. I see.
So, what we need to do is put these on TikTok so that people can stitch them. Hide, Chris.
Let me just help you out there with a little montage sequence. Okay, done.
Alrighty, guys, we're closing out the emoji challenge and moving on in the feedback loop to, again, talking to our Spotify listeners. Guys, not only can you rate the show, but as you know, we rate every story of Doctor Who that we talk about on this podcast. You can do that too. You can immediately, or whenever you want, go to your Spotify app after we've rated it and essentially give it your own rating. So that could be either a Dalek, an Ogron, a Viscount Banger, a fixed point in time. All those are explained at the end of the show. And we will announce the results on the show, which I'm about to do so for one of our recent ones. And that is the Saranga Conundrum. So the results are in. And fans appear to be not unanimous, but very clear point of view. It's an Ogron with almost 60% of the vote.
But less than you might expect. 29% said Professor Hater, which is it's bad, but at least we learned something. Maybe there are people out there who now have careers in nuclear fusion because of the Saranga. 7% said it was a Dalek. That's higher than I would expect as well.
Those Eve Cicero fangirls. But the Hater I could see. I thought that might have been your rating. To refresh everyone, we both gave it Ogrons. I gave it sort of a big, stinky, smelly Ogron, and probably a dumb one at that, because I thought it was potentially the worst episode of Doctor Who, just because it was so unmemorable.
Strong statement.
Yeah.
Especially when Hyde exists. I'm sorry. I'm just going to talk down Hyde every chance I get now. But yeah, the 7% saying fixed point in time is interesting.
I know.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
It's very, very curious. I mean, for people are jumping onto Doctor Who all the time, right? And I think that a lot of fixed points in time happen when we're discussing an episode that is associated with the things that got you into the show. So
I guess that's Tosin Cole, and he's a fan of the show.
There we go. Thanks, Tosin. Thank you for voting. Please do vote. You know what? Vote before we even do. If you have a strong feeling about Marco Polo now, smash that button. If you think he's a Viscount Banger, and you've studied it your entire life, go for it.
All right. Also, a good place to leave comments, ratings, reviews, or just conversation is YouTube, of course. We're at youtube.com/pull-to-open. You can see us as well as whatever Easter eggs you might find in our backgrounds, or foregrounds, come to think of it. So check that out. Subscribe there. Even I would recommend you would do it even if you are subscribed to us on your podcast app, because it really does help the show when we have more subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah, and you know what? Just pull up these other apps while you're on the show. Let's not pretend you're not multitasking right now. Come on. Add one more task. What's the diff?
Totally. Fire up another browser window. It's all good.
Yeah, you could fire up TikTok if you like Chinese spyware installed on your phone. And we've been we love it. Overblown. It's fine.
You don't have to share anything with the TikTokers. That's all right. Just unclick all the things and, just have the app. Or lurk. Give them fake info on a burner phone.
Yes.
It's fine.
TikTok, totally the mighty pleasure dome of Kubla Khan of the socials.
Well, how are we doing on that, Pete? Of Pull to Open, certainly. So we try to post videos almost every day, and we actually had lots of great comments on a video that we posted over the past week about our Gallifrey episode.
Yeah, you were saying we had one video on it and it went viral.
Yeah, it was kind of a short trip episode, so we don't do as many videos for those. But the one video we did do went super viral, and it basically just was mostly the premise that I went into on that show about, I think Gallifrey is better heard about than seen. It's kind of like the Gallifrey's best era in the show. I think, in my opinion, a lot of people's opinions, is actually the first part of New Who, when it's just not around, and it's just sort of this legendary thing, that the place that the Doctor's from.
Yeah, with the payoff, right? It really works with the mentions and the payoff over multiple seasons. Yes, I'd agree with you.
And a lot of people tended to agree. And though there were a few comments that I found a bit surprising, and I wouldn't mind touching on. So a couple of people, Maddie Lewis and Jay Morrison, left comments, and Maddie says Gallifrey in the End of Time was awesome. And Jay Morrison also said, I also enjoyed Gallifrey in End of Time. So there is a non-zero amount of people who really enjoyed that depiction of Gallifrey in the End of Time. And, not to read too much into two comments, but I do think our TikTok fans surprised us a little bit, because you and I are obviously old school fans. There's a whole generation of people now who grew up on New Who, and the reaction in the End of Time, I was just a little taken aback by, which I can sort of understand.
I can see it. I can see it for, 2 words, Timothy Dalton.
Yeah. Oh.
How can you
perfect casting.
I mean, I have my issues with the End of Time. Lord knows. Time Lord knows.
I think most of us do.
And everyone on the Earth turning into the Master. I'm just going to say that. We'll get to it when we get to it.
When we get to it, though, expect a good one of my trademark rants about the falling through the window at the end. All right. Okay. Or was the skylight, but go on.
All right. The randomizer will one day knock 4 times, and we'll make our way there. But yes, I do love those scenes, even though I was not a fan of the Doctor's mother appearing with her face. It was a very striking image. And it was also a very sort of a great example of how Doctor Who does well with Time Lords on a cheap set. Right? It was very, very limited. It's like Timothy Dalton, a spotlight and big collars, and what else do you need? You
need the table.
The fireworks
table
flow.
in front of him.
The table. and you need a glove. You need his massive Thanos-like glove that he uses to such great effect. But holy cow, yes, best Rassilon ever. Yeah, you almost kind of want to never see Rassilon again after that, because he just dropped the mic. So I get it. I get that you like that. I like the shenanigans of it almost being pulled out of and replacing Earth, and the Time Lords being super, like the most evil thing any Time Lord has ever done, probably, right? In the End of Time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So
it's great.
Yeah, I dig it. I'm with you, TikTokers.
I would go on and on. I think the dam would burst, and this would become the End of Time episode. But I did want to note this, and it makes me
look random, forward. But we're not that random. Yes, sorry.
Exactly. But it's making me look forward to doing that for the podcast, and I almost feel like that we're already. This is our de facto challenge for the randomizer. We've been doing so much Time Lord stuff lately. Why not bring us to the End of Time?
Yeah.
I'm just now that
and we did do the Waters of Mars, did the Waters of Mars, and the randomizer does like to do back-to-backs. So I think our chances are strong. Anyway.
It could be. I just, I think this comment has definitely awakened something in me in that, like, oh yeah, like I think a lot of people have sort of mixed opinions on End of Time, but now I'm like, I'm actually looking forward to seeing all that Time Lord stuff again, especially with all the stuff we've talked about and all the context that we've seen and inferred from all the stuff we've seen recently. So, yeah.
And it would be super relevant to see the end of the last RTD era before the new one begins.
True, yeah. So, all right. The challenge is before you randomizer, the Uber challenge. Not for the next time, but for sometime soon.
Yes.
All right, closing out the feedback loop. Of course, we're on Pull to Open 63 in so many places on Instagram, Facebook, and as I mentioned earlier, Twitter. Go ahead, drop us a line there. Ask us all about Humoji challenges and how legendary they are, or just start one of your own. Yeah, it's great.
Looking forward to that supercut. Thanks, fans. All right, let's get to it. Not much news this week. Nothing to discuss in the trailer. People still stunned from the trailer.
Are you sure there's nothing to talk about? We could talk about lots of things. Let's talk about the trailer again. Let's talk about...
No. I see what you're doing.
Hey, remember we never really talked about what SIDRAT stands for in our work. We can talk all about that. There's multiple things it could stand for, and we could explore each and every one of them.
Nice try, Pete, but the Time Lords are closing in on you. You are walking in slow motion now. The Time Lords have slowed down time. It is time to enter the world of TLDW. Too long didn't watch. Too long can't watch in the case of Marco Polo.
I don't want to do TLDW. It's so long. It's 7.
We could also say the TL stands for telesnaps in this case. This completely missing episode. You know what? Okay. Before I'll give you a little reprieve because I think it's important that we set the scene in terms of talking about how we both watched this. How we both watched Marco Polo.
Oh, thank God. So, okay.
Yes. So I will say that this was... I did ask the randomizer for something that was easy, if you remember. And I actually think the randomizer listened. And it gave me something where I could just read the script and look at the amazing set photos that we have, courtesy of the director, Waris Hussein, a very important figure in Doctor Who history, who saved these amazing these gorgeous full-color photos. So I had those. I had the script. I have the knowledge of like what all of their voices sound like in my head, and make up a Marco Polo. There you go. It kind of looks a bit David Tennant-ish in the set photos. So I gave him David Tennant voices. But you, Pete, you stuffered through all of the telesnaps. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there are various versions of lost episodes, taking the audio from them and mixing them with telesnaps and whatever surviving footage there might be. And usually those are in Daily Motion. So I went there, and there's a number of them. And I started with the black and white. There's a bunch of black and white ones, but actually at least one person has put together full color versions.
Ooh.
And I'm not sure how they did it. I think it's mostly using those telesnaps that you mentioned, or either I think it's a mix of telesnaps and Waris Hussein's photos. I think
they had an on-set photographer, I believe, for all except one of the episodes.
Right. And so basically, they were either all colorized or they were the color versions, and there were surprisingly a lot of them. Like there were in some cases multiple photos of the same scene, even from different angles. It looked like, and these guys, the people who work on these are actually quite good in that they'll crop the same image to make it look like a zoom in or close up. And they'll do some panning and scanning here and there. I mean, it's not 100%, but it is. In places, it was almost as if it was motion. It was a little more like, if you remember the early 2000s, they would do the motion comics essentially for things like Death Comes to Time in real time. It was a little like that. Yeah.
How interesting. I actually think that it sounds like I missed out a little bit. Just I was so focused on the script, and then as soon as I read the script, I knew we have to go into history corner here. So I went full bore on researching. So you would recommend this over, say, The Smugglers?
Well, yeah, like for as a visual experience, certainly, and it might have to do more with the quality and the time put in by the person doing it. But definitely a better experience than the Smugglers. And I will just say, I'll get into it when we get in the commentary, but I will say just an Uber comment. It was such a joy to see one of the best TARDIS teams in full color. And even though it wasn't video per se, I was very appreciative of it. I was kind of even sort of taken back a little bit to when I was a kid and seeing these for the first time and liking that team, and sort of some similar feelings of like seeing that camaraderie. And I just really like, wow. And it's kind of in color. And this is, if there's anything that should have been in color from the black and white era, I kind of feel like it's this episode, but I'm kind of getting into it. I think I'm emboldened by this commentary about how we watched it, and I need to get through what we need to get through.
All right. Well, as you know, in this is the game show segment where this week we're going to torture Pete because we ask one of us to summarize. This time it's Pete's turn. The Doctor Who story that we're talking about in record time, and that record time is 30 seconds per classic series episode. And this is a 7-parter. Amazingly, it's actually a breezy read if you look through the script, and there's obviously bits like the sword fighting is kind of doesn't take much time, but I'm sure it took some time to watch. But it's not going to take much time to summarize. So you, sir, have the luxury of 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That is a luxurious Silk Road of an amount of time by TLDW standards. So you should be good here. But you're feeling confident. You're ready to take it on.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
No, I'm feeling okay. No, there we go. We're done. Let's do it. Let's jump in.
We're ready. You closed all your tabs, so we're ready to go.
Now I have.
All right. The official pull to open summary of Marco Polo in 3 minutes and 30 seconds begins in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the TARDIS materializes somewhere. It's a mountain in the mountains. There's snow. They see a footprint, but the TARDIS is broken. Something's wrong with it. Now it can't even. There's no heat. There's no water. It can't go anywhere. So they start to look for fuel, and they're captured by Mongols. And they realize quickly they're in the 13th century in essentially Mongolia, and they're captured. And they're brought to the camp, and they actually meet Marco Polo. And they've just encountered his caravan, and they're going to Cathay, and they're captured by this guy Tigana, who he's been an agent of. He's basically an emissary from this other Khan. They're going to meet Kublai Khan. They're going to work out the terms of this peace deal. And basically, Marco's fascinated by the TARDIS. He thinks the Doctor's a wizard, and he thinks it's a magic cabinet or caravan that can actually fly. And he thinks, I'm going to offer this to Kublai Khan because Marco is essentially his indentured servant. His emissary has been committed to staying with him. And he needs his leave to go back to Venice, which he wants to do. And he thinks the TARDIS is a way to do that. But Tigana, who is secretly working for the other Khan, wants to manipulate things and capture the TARDIS for himself and his Khan, so that they'll get the secrets and essentially use it to get dominance and win whatever war. So they go all around the Silk Road. There's a lot of stops in various cities and oases along the way. Tigana tries to get rid of their water and kill them that way. That doesn't work. He tries to get bandits to kill everybody so he can take things. That doesn't work. The TARDIS crew slowly but surely realizes Tigana is the bad guy here and tries to convince Marco he's evil and working against him. But Marco does not believe them, although he starts to doubt them. So they try to get away in the TARDIS. But Susan, who is befriended, has a deep friendship now because they've been with these people for weeks, with Ping Cho, who is a young woman who's been bequeathed to someone in Kublai Khan's court. She wants to say goodbye to Ping Cho, but she's captured by Tigana. He forces them to stay. And then Marco doesn't trust them anymore because they had to steal the key from Marco to do that. So they eventually end up in Peking. The Doctor starts basically meets Kublai Khan. They sort of bond over games of backgammon. The Doctor then, even though the TARDIS has essentially been given to him, the Doctor keeps winning and winning and winning, but he basically says, I'm going to give you all my winnings if you just give me the TARDIS back. They play one more game. The Khan wins. So they don't have the TARDIS again. But then Tagana tries to assassinate Kublai Khan, but Marco Polo has finally come around and realized he's the bad guy. He stops him in a big sword fight. Tagana is defeated. He actually kills himself, impales himself in a sword, and the TARDIS crew basically runs back into the TARDIS. The Khan lets them go, and Marco sort of
time. Yes, I think you pretty much nailed it there. I will add that Ping Cho, her husband, just dies in a very her betrothed, the 75-year-old, just dies in a very Deus Ex Machina kind of way. Taking Quicksilver. But I think that the race to the end there accurately represents how Marco Polo ends, which is it wraps up very quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah. It's like Tagana dies, they run into the TARDIS, the Khan seems okay with it. Yeah, and that's it. And it's like, wonder what was with them. And it was like Marco Polo.
The first thing that jumped out, literally the first thing that jumped out, you said Mongolia, it's really China. The Mongols owned China, but they were trying to be very Chinese at this stage in history, not to get into the history corner too quickly.
Right.
But it was very much China, known to Europeans as Cathay, which was actually just a region of China.
My bad.
Thinking of anyway. No, it's all good. It's the geography is pretty confusing here.
You could kind of think, is it the Himalayas at the beginin? Because you kind of think it's like, this is the Yeti. Or something.
It's part of the Himalayan range. So it's connected.
Gotcha.
But it is. Yeah, very, very desolate place where Marco Polo actually went to heal from what could have been malaria. So it's actually a healthy place. But that brings me to the other thing that I don't think was really mentioned. Is the Doctor's kind of ill in this a lot.
Yeah.
And is a grumpy old man, and that is actually how he bonds with the Khan in the end. Yes, they end up playing endless games of backgammon, but it's really the Doctor can't kowtow because of his bad back. Mm-hmm. To which I say, Doctor, have you ever heard of yoga? Tai Chi, maybe? You've traveled in hundreds of years in space and time. You haven't learned how to loosen that back up? Come on, dude. I feel like that's an important plot point that the Doctor he was written out of it for episode 2 because William Hartnell was actually sick right here in serial 4 of the show. He got sick.
And it's funny that he's
echo of what was to come.
In the script, he's ill in the first episode, right? Because he's got altitude sickness and he's just kind of like can't do much. And then in episode 2, he's written out entirely, but then they write it so that he's just indignant or something, that he's just not coming out of his tent. Or his caravan or whatever.
And he really isn't like this is not the Doctor's story until that last episode, where it's almost like the payoff for all of that sickness and being out of it and being grumpy at everyone. But until then, it's basically the Ian show.
Yeah, it is the Ian show. And apparently there was some stuff in the behind the scenes where there were certain things written, and I'm not sure exactly which scene this is, but he wasn't really too happy about it. And then he is like, it's like one of these classic, actor not being happy. Agent calls up whoever, whether it's Verity Lambert or Sidney Newman, and says, "Hey, let's give my guy some better scenes," and they end up sort of working something out. And then this becomes hugely an Ian show. I feel like this particular story is very good for Ian and Susan. And it's 7 episodes, so everybody gets fun things to do. And the Doctor sort of comes alive as a character in the last couple of episodes. Because honestly, before that, he doesn't do a lot other than sort of feign to be ill, complain, and try to break into the TARDIS and fix the thing, right? But then he has all that sort of cool stuff with Kublai Khan, and so that works. Ian, obviously, and at the same time, Ian has this great sort of friendship and relationship with Marco Polo that evolves throughout, and there's a lot of back and forth there. And then Susan gets to be, the friend, best friends with Ping Cho, and wear some fun costumes and kind of be yourself, but also be sort of the modern girl.
This was Caroline Ford's favorite story of her brief run as Susan. And you can see why.
Unfortunately, Barbara is the one that sort of gets a little bit sidelined. Now, again, it's 7 episodes. She does some stuff, and there's the whole thing where goes to the cave, and there's the eyes in the wall, and I kind of skipped over a bunch of the back and forth in the TLDW.
She gets captured, but she gets captured. It's really not worth mentioning Barbara at all in a summary of this because she plays, unfortunately, such a small role. And there's one point early on where she says, "Oh yes, it's 1279," and I felt like we were going to get more of a history lesson from Barbara.
Yeah,
because
as the history teacher.
This exactly, and this is another thing you wouldn't get from the summary. It's a very didactic episode, isn't it? It's very education. We learn about condensation, which I think is a little stretch to say that Marco Polo wouldn't understand how condensation works. But anyway,
well, you think about where this comes in Doctor Who's sort of storyline. You had an earthly child, which intros the show, and we just talked about that previously, and sort of how they do some prehistory stuff and kind of sets up what the show is. Then you have the Daleks, which is a surprise hit to everybody. It's like, okay, we're going to have weird alien stuff, and and then everyone's, whoa, that was huge. But
Dalek mania begins.
They had a quick break with Edge of Destruction, and then the mandate originally was like, hey, it's sci-fi, but it's educational. So clearly, like they wanted to showcase that. And it's like, we're going to have a big historical. We're going to learn all about Marco Polo. And again, at the time, to a European audience, I would think this is, kind of fascinating stuff. It's like not too many people probably know a ton about history in Asian history in that time. And, just kind of this fascination with that culture.
Season 1 went back and forth between historicals and sci-fi. Like that was the trend at the time. It was definitely a different vision for what Doctor Who could be. And for this one, this was Sidney Newman, who, is the guy who commissioned a Canadian producer who commissioned Doctor Who in the first place. Thank you, Canada. And thank you, Canada, also for John Lucarotti, who wrote this story.
Yeah.
Take a bow, Pete, on behalf of Canada. And its involvement in Doctor Who.
Yeah. So John Lucarotti, he was Canadian too, right? Am I wrong about that? Or no?
He certainly worked for the CBC.
Yeah. And he's definitely I guess perhaps master of the historical, at least his reputation, because he did this one and ticks all the boxes. Basically, he establishes the template for the pure historical here.
Yeah.
And that I think everybody who did pure historicals afterward essentially followed. And, he did the Aztecs, which was also this season. And he also did the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, which was in season 3. And he novelized all of them too.
Yeah, and he really, so with this one, he brought a lot of research to bear because he'd written a radio series in Canada, I believe, 18 parts. No wonder 7 episodes were falling off a log to him. 18-part radio series called The 3 Journeys of Marco Polo, less than a decade earlier. He was commissioned for this before Doctor Who goes on air. It actually gets greenlit on the 22nd of November, 1963, the day Kennedy is shot, the day before Doctor Who goes on air for the first time. That's when the official go-ahead for the serial known as Marco Polo was made, the official order.
Well, interesting, yeah. So I wanted to be sure of that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I said earlier, I think once the Daleks is broadcast, you get kind of a maybe a different. You might start thinking differently about the show. Certainly, the creators did, of what works, what doesn't, and what they sort of should focus on going forward. Not that they lost the historicals, but pre-Daleks, you're like, okay, we're doing, like you said, we're alternating sci-fi and history, and this was done thinking this was going to be a template of what the show does going forward, and to a large extent it was. But it's like the idea of okay, we're going to put the TARDIS team alongside historical figures and essentially kind of do what they do and build it around politics and world events at the time, so that you can explore those as you go, and there you have Barbara as the history teacher to sort of explain every now and then what the context is.
And Ian is the science teacher to give you a little lesson in what bamboo, but how bamboo burns, and
which
the singing desert.
Again, as I described it there, it's sort of like it almost sounds bad, like this is a kid show and it's like 3, 2, 1 contact or something, and you're just gonna like have people turning to camera and explaining it. But no, it completely works. It's very, very good. I mean, again, Marco Polo, it's a bit long, but by keeping it focused on the characters and kind of what we're doing, in particular Marco and Tagana as sort of these two people who have different motivations, but both have sort of a similar path, obviously have the same path because they're both part of the same caravan, but it is
right.
That tension, that central tension is sort of the drama in this episode, and everything sort of builds off that, including the sort of historical or even pseudo-historical stuff. And it really, I think it really worked. I was really surprised how much I like this. I will say, for people who remember my review of The Smugglers, I will say I was scared going into this, watching telesnaps again, thinking, oh my God, I got to get through 7. It's going to be a chore. I'm not going to like it. And maybe, and I was scared. Maybe I just don't like telesnap stuff. Like maybe I'm going to be bossed. But no, like I really thoroughly enjoyed Marco Polo. Like I thought from start to finish, it was really compelling story.
Fantastic. I may have to dip into the telesnaps now. Well, I'm with you. I think it's interesting. It is sad that Barbara is out of the action a lot, but it is perhaps best that we didn't have the didactic history lesson, because it gives more space for Marco Polo himself, who, again, a thing that I think needs mentioning up top. This is narrated by Marco Polo. And he's in the back, and okay, granted, it's not very interesting diary entries. Especially once I got into, researching Marco Polo and what was written of his journeys at the time. It doesn't measure up a lot, and it's certainly less raunchy and bawdy than his writings. It's just basically in the show, the narration is just he's reading out directions, and then we went to this place on the edge of the Great Cathay Wall, and then we crossed this desert. He's basically just Google Maps. And those linking narrations could have been a lot more interesting, but it is a very interesting choice, especially this early in the show's evolution, to have the historical figure himself narrate the experience. And we'll talk later about this, because I have many ideas of how much, like, this is I think you're right. This is a great story. Its reputation is well deserved. Could you imagine doing it in the modern era? How much better it could be done? How much more big picture it could be, and how much you could play with Marco's narration, given that he was sort of famously thought of as a fabulist, right? If in Italy, it might as well be rule number 1: Marco Polo lies. Like, even to this day, Italian parents will call their children Marco Polos if they tell tall tales.
Interesting. I wonder if that's how the swimming pool game got its start. So it's kind of like Marco Polo, and you're just kind of like, trying to deceive the other person who's, closing their eyes that where you are.
That probably makes sense. I meant to look that up. I did not, but I think you probably got it. He was associated unfairly with lying, because a lot of his claims got borne out. Like they couldn't believe that there were millions of people in China. That was his nickname, Millions. It was a derogatory one. But of course there were.
Flying caravans, Marco. Come on, bro.
That's the thing. We could really have played with, like, this being an alternate version of Marco Polo's diaries, where he actually dreams up this thing. He did literally, the real Marco Polo, think that he'd encountered unicorns. They were probably rhinoceroses. But, like, that's the level of this sounds so weird. I'm in this magical land of his stuff. So really inspired choice, really. Like, the original script had Ian and Barbara and the Doctor narrating, which I think would have been terrible idea.
Totally. Yeah, and I think I'm glad they didn't, because that would have also maybe tempted them to have them narrate other episodes, and have that sort of be a format, which I think does start to verge on what I was talking, like, the after school special on history, if you're kind of doing things like that. Yeah. But having Marco do it, not only it's a better choice, but it gives that his perspective on them, right, is, I think, part of what sort of makes this interesting, because we know them and we like them, but like his whole world, I mean, it just better transports you there, frankly. And it's
so appropriate because he's trying to figure out, are they moral people? Like Ian does some, like he discovers a guard that was attacked, but Ian was going to attack him himself. And, Ian has to lie about not finding the key to protect Ping Cho. So that mean he's good or is he bad? Like there's a lot of, interesting morals in this story that Marco has to figure out, because he is, he is the power center of the story. Entirely appropriate. I wish that they had inserted somewhere in this, it would have been so much more effective. I think, like he flashes a medallion of Kublai Khan at one point to, like he's basically, hey, I'm the Kublai Khan cop.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know your Marco Polo history, like he was the servant, the personal friend and servant of the Emperor Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. But what he did actually travel around with was more amazing than we see in this story. He actually traveled with this giant gold plate where the emperor himself had written these lines about, hey, I will basically chop off your heads if you don't do everything this guy says.
You'd think he would need that because, as a white guy sort of going around as the agent of the Khan, like you'd need to have to produce some pretty serious evidence that people should do what he says, and he's got it.
Yep. And that's sort of an example of like how. So first of all, major props to Doctor Who for this early in its evolution, trying something like the narration from Marco. It's an early example of how you can just try. You can change format week from week with a time travel show, and they do so very effectively here. And I think the willingness to experiment is super important here, and shows where the show is going. But yeah, it also is definitely an example of their ambition exceeding their reach. They're trying to do a Gobi Desert sandstorm in practically live, because these shows were put out live,
like a week basically. Or two. They were filming them. They probably had not finished filming it while it started to be broadcast. That's very common in the early days of Doctor Who, all the way up to the Pertwee era, I believe.
Yeah, so they have to have these janky solutions for how to make a sandstorm. You basically just throw in some TV snow on one monitor and mix it with another, and have a wind machine in the studio.
And I think they were still in those. The early studios for Doctor Who were very tiny.
This is Lime Grove, very, very tiny studio. Yeah, and it's interesting that one thing that jumps out at me about Marco Polo, the story, is that first of all, it was one of the most sold stories overseas. I think there were like 19 countries that had copies of this thing that have now all been destroyed. All of them.
Yep.
So far as we know, we may yet discover a missing Marco Polo in an attic, but extraordinary. Just irony. A terrible, terrible level of barbarism. Very ironic.
It's cruel.
Especially ironic given, the nature of the stories of Marco Polo himself, related to his, well, you don't know, but related to his prison cellmate. We only have copies of that now. Like, it's one of the most read books in the world, but we only have copies of it. So, and that changes over time. So the fact of this being lost, that the playing with historical narrative here, it gets very meta when you consider how much of this is missing. And
and I think, like I said in the pre-show, it's really one of the reasons it's so tragic is that this is some of the best costumes, some of the most colorful set design and stuff.
And ironically, that is so that the animation people have said that's why this is not likely to be animated anytime soon. Which, you contrast with the Smugglers, which we know that's going to be animated apparently. We watched the Smugglers and we were like, really? Whereas this would be amazing, but it would take a Disney-like budget. And that's the thing that jumped out at me, is that Disney actually came calling in the 60s, like after this aired, to see about getting the rights, not to, a story called Marco Polo, but specifically this story.
Interesting.
Like this
time travelers encountering Marco Polo, because basically they wanted to do the story of Marco Polo and say, well, Doctor Who did that in the 60s and it was really amazing. And they were like, oh, actually, why rewrite it? Man, they were rebooting even then.
Right, exactly. So and we're full circle with Doctor Who and Disney Plus, right? They're actually finally working together. So it would
don't get them to do another version of Full Circle at least. But yeah, I should mention the costume designer was Daphne Dare. Yeah. And she did an amazing job. But go ahead and Google now, guys. Marco Polo. Yes. Hit the image.
Google it.
Hit images and just enjoy. It's funny. I remember the Keys of Marinus growing up because obviously with this missing, Edge of Destruction goes right into the Keys of Marinus, and I was always struck by what they were wearing in episode 1 of that because it's like they're still in their Marco Polo outfits.
Nice continuity.
Yeah, which they did then, and you're kind of like wondering what's going on there. I could be misremembering. I might be thinking about the Crusades. I forget which one it is, but they're still wearing those. I think in the Space Museum too. So there's like,
it was very much a serial. There was none of this modern sense of time elapsing between stories. This is what they did in the Hartnell era. So, you go straight into the next one.
At the start, this one starts with them checking out the footprint, right? And you're kind of a little bit wondering, well, why? What happened there? And the last minute or so of the Edge of Destruction has them materializing somewhere, and Susan runs out because she's young and adventurous, and she comes back and she's having fun in the snow and. But then there's the boot, right? The boot print, which do we ever really get like an answer on that? Are we meant to think it's a Yeti? I guess I think we are because there's all this about some creature, but then I think the implication is that creature was Tegana.
Yes, so Tegana just has very, very big shoes.
Yeah, I guess
very big boots,
and maybe like it's not part of the plot at all. So you don't like some Yeti in the background peeking out or whatever. And we all know the Yeti really are robots in the London Underground, guys. So
exactly. So what would they be doing in the Himalayas? Oh, the roof of the world.
But this solves a plot. Like right off the bat, there's a couple of plot things I got to pick at. One is that I don't understand why Marco believes the TARDIS can fly this caravan when he's never seen it do that.
Yes.
He's never seen it do anything. He's also hears about how they can all fit in it, and he just sort of goes, "Oh wow, that must be wizardry." And he basically believes in the TARDIS's abilities, whatever they are, without ever actually seeing it do anything. As far as he's seen, it's just a box. Now, the only thing that works here, in my view, is that Tegana's seen it. And we know he's seen them come in and out of it, so that's part of it. But he must have seen it materialize as well. Otherwise,
which would make the boot make sense. Yes, that would make sense. Yeah, Marco's surprisingly incurious, and let's get into a little mild nitpicking. But Marco actually he gets on our scoreboard. You remember, Peter, our companion DMV test.
Yep.
He gets on the scoreboard because Marco Polo is actually invited into the TARDIS by the Doctor, but refuses the call to adventure, ironically, it being Marco Polo, the ultimate adventurer. So I didn't quite believe that. I didn't believe that either of them be so curious about the TARDIS. It totally beggars belief that the TARDIS is out of water. Maybe in my headcanon here, like I'm, we know that the randomizer is very interested in the swimming pool in the TARDIS. Maybe this is why the swimming pool was created in the first place. The Doctor's like, I must make a note to myself to have more drinking water on hand.
So you've really got to like contort headcanon to really make sense out of this with respect to later Doctor Who, right? Because one of the things they did a lot particularly in season 1 of Doctor Who, is the TARDIS was always failing. It in fact even had something called a fault locator, which I think they referred to maybe again once or twice in season 2, and then I think they stopped.
Yeah. So then the fault locator broke. So
exactly, which I think is probably they should use that line sometimes. It's actually a pretty good line. So, but you have essentially the fluid link stuff in the Daleks, which wasn't really broken, but Susan believes the Doctor when he needs this thing. The radiation meter doesn't really work because nothing happens until Susan walks away from it. There's a bunch of examples in season 1, and certainly even later, like in the Space Museum, that like something in the TARDIS doesn't click right, so they don't really materialize until it clicks right, and there's all this stuff. Like basically, this was I hesitant to call it a trope. I guess it was like a more of a feature than a bug in the show, which is like, oh, the TARDIS is kind of rickety and doesn't really work half the time, which is good, but it's rooted still almost, I wouldn't say too much because they didn't know where they were going in the show, in sort of it being invented by, like, the implications, like it's much more of a conventional machine, potentially invented by the Doctor, which is sort of what they went for in the movies. And it's just kind of breaking down all the time. So this component in Marco Polo, he pulls it out, and it's really just some circuit board or whatever. And because that thing has failed, not only is there no heat, there's no water, they can't go anywhere, there's no lights. Like, basically, this is some essential component of the TARDIS that he can only fix if he has a few days time to I don't know. They don't even show what he does with it, right? Like,
yeah, I know. We never even really get confirmation that it's fixed. They just right? They just go back in.
Well, he just kind of he just needs time with it. But I'm also like, well, what's he using? Like, does he have a sonic screwdriver at this point? Is he like what? How is he fixing this essential TARDIS component?
Yeah, is William Hartnell off screen and like a giant pair of goggles, like hanging underneath the underneath the console, like Matt Smith and the Doctor's wife? Like, no, I don't really see him doing that, especially not with his back.
So I suggest to square the circle of like no water is like that just sort of means there's no running water, and I also think you kind of have to believe that this is early enough in the Doctor's travels that he hasn't even really fully explored the TARDIS. Like, he basically probably only thinks it's just a few rooms or whatever. Like, there's not that much of it. And maybe he either hadn't educated himself on the vastness of TARDISes, or maybe it's just not normal in Time Lord society to use the vastness inside. It's more of a tool you use when you need it. So I don't know. There must be some disconnect there, because otherwise it really does make no sense, because you could just go somewhere, presumably in the TARDIS, and find something.
So here's my headcanon post name of the Doctor, which is that William Hartnell's Doctor, the original Doctor, is just so irascible all the time because he's really pissed off that he took the advice of this woman who just happened to be standing outside the Type 40 TARDIS zone, told her to take this busted one, but it would be much more fun. He's like, how could I be so stupid? Like, this circuit seems to connect to literally everything somehow for some reason. This isn't just busted. This is just like everything's wrong. The chameleon circuit is wrong. And I'm just like, I'm not having the fun. I thought I was going to have, had to take my granddaughter along for X reasons. I really thought I was going to be running away and having fun by myself here. So you definitely get a bit of that now, right?
Yeah. It ends up, it's more trouble than it's worth. And he's just fixing it all the time. Maybe he invented the fault locator. Just like we never hear about it, because he was just like, I need something to detect all the problems with this machine.
Nice. Yeah. But it's nice to see the TARDIS as a MacGuffin. Obviously, that's why the randomizer brought us here, just to answer that question early, because randomizer loves to get TARDIS-y with it. And here the TARDIS is all over the place. The Doctor's very concerned with its location. And I think this is direct rebuff of what I was saying in the Saranga conundrum, that like in the classic series, the Doctor used to just, abandon the TARDIS and not really care about where it was, and then they just find their way back to it. No, the location, like right here at the very beginning, the location of the TARDIS is very important. Perhaps wasn't necessarily so much in the Daleks, but here it is, and here they're very concerned, and the Doctor even gets pissed off when they put it in the stables.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the whole thing of like towards the end when they're going to Peking, they actually it's following them. It's not in the same caravan, and that's sort of one of the ways Tagana is sort of almost able to get it.
Right, he diverts it.
Right. And right off the bat, you're like, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you can't hold on. That's going to go bad. Of course, at this point in the story, they've essentially been, I think, taken prisoner. I think Leon's going to go back at one point because they've essentially betrayed Marco for the second time to get the key, and they almost get away. I think this is the end of episode 5, which I think is a good scene because they're mostly concerned with Tigana and his issues with the Oasis and issues with the Cave of Eyes, whatever it is.
Cave of Eyes, 500
right.
eyes.
That's it, Cave of 500 Eyes. And there's all this sort of Machiavellian stuff he's doing and plotting, and they're slowly working against him. But then right at the end of episode 5, you're reminded, oh, yeah, the TARDIS. This is still Doctor Who. And they get inside and you hear the hum again. And it's such a relief, to both them and the viewers. You're like, yes, they're this close to victory. And of course, there's the whole thing. And this is why, among all the things in my TLDW, I focused on this, where they almost get away, except because, Susan's friendship with Ping Cho. They have to come back. So I really like that moment. That sort of remind, obviously the stakes are very high. And it's kind of almost ends then and there. Of course, it can't. And then, without something happening to Ghana or some resolution of this conflict.
It's interesting from the TARDIS perspective, speaking of the time traveliness of this, what is conspicuously absent here at the beginning of Doctor Who is any discussion about changing history. The fear of changing history. Like that really wouldn't come in until the Aztecs, right? Can't rewrite history, not one line. But like they don't even discuss it here, which is curious because like this is a very fraught moment for Marco Polo. He's trying to win his freedom from the Khan, which he would eventually do when deliver the story on this the story is based on.
Let's get in the corner.
Let's get in the corner.
He was that deal. Wasn't a TARDIS, I don't think.
It was not a TARDIS. No, he was accompanying a Mongolian princess to Persia, I believe, to the furthest flung area of the Khan's empire. And by the time she got there, her potential husband had died.
No Quicksilver involved?
Yeah, no Quicksilver involved. And then I believe before Marco Polo came back, I think I've got the timeline right here, the Khan himself died. So he was just free to go back. And then for an encore, he gets involved in a war between Venice and Genoa. And then gets captured by Genoa. And that's when he becomes famous. Because he's a Venetian nobleman, so they're like, okay, we're going to treat this guy well, and he just he has the very good fortune to be imprisoned next to a writer of romances, who basically just starts transcribing everything that Margot talks about, and then he just becomes famous. Like people come visit him in his quote unquote prison, very white collar prison there basically, and nice. He just becomes this bestseller even in his time, with all these fantastical stories of Far Cathay, and so much of what we know, so much comes down from Marco Polo. Right. So let's talk about the hash. We've been in History Corner. Well, let's get in Hashish Corner, because that also comes from the writings of Marco Polo.
Okay, let's get into it. And we've got to talk also about the hashines.
Yes, so that's the context in which it is mentioned.
Yeah,
is you probably know it. It's supposedly the origin of the word assassin.
I do from watching Marco Polo.
Yeah. Okay.
That was definitely a Today I Learned moment when hashines. It is assassins. Yes. It's like, oh, that's good to know.
But also entirely false.
Oh.
And entirely based on fake news from Marco Polo.
Dang, man. All right. Yep. Now today I'm learning more from the Chris's History Corner. Go. What is the deal with hashish and assassins and whatever else?
Okay, so that the story is told in Marco Polo's travels, the book that was basically transcribed from all of his stories. That this was the case, that there was a sect of assassins, and they gave, there was this ruler who gave hash to young boys and made them wake up in a garden and imagine they were in heaven, and then he's like, knocks them out again with this substance and says, oh, hey, you want to go back? You visited heaven. You want to go back there? You work for me now. You go assassinate so-and-so and so-and-so. They became famous when they assassinated a Prince of Wales in England.
Wow.
So that's really where their legend was burnished. But no, they did not. It was almost certain that they didn't have hash. It wasn't in the liquid form that Marco Polo described. That's not how people used hashish. It didn't, you couldn't use it to knock people out and then unknock people out. The story makes no sense. There is a much easier explanation for the origin of the word assassins, which is, I think it was something like hash or hasha was the name of the leader that they were all serving.
Okay.
Of course they were just named Hashins. They were named after this dude. So it was nothing to do with hashish at all. It was just, Marco believing a tall tale or creating a tall tale, or just like, I don't know, maybe he was the reefer madness of the 13th century or 12th century. Like he was just, hey kids, don't do hash because you'll end up as assassins.
Maybe it was like trying to make himself be super cool to whatever young lass he was trying to talk up. And like, I'm kind of a bad boy because I've tried hashish. And if you try hashish, you're kind of like a violent dude usually. And that's not me. That's not me, baby. But, intriguing her and getting her to think he's a bit of a, got an edge to him. I don't,
So
I'll see. I'll try it. I'll let you know how it goes. No.
Well, it's funny you should bring sex into it because... as I mentioned, the travels of Marco Polo are just stuffed with sex, and he talks about how it was a thing in these Mongol kingdoms that if you were invited into someone's home, the female members of that household and you were a man, the female members of the household were encouraged to sleep with you, and you would actually give out tokens to these women. To prove that they were not virgins, which apparently was much prized. And, Kublai Khan himself had like 300 women imported into his harem every year, basically, as his potential concubines.
Hey.
Only 40 made the cut.
I wonder what that audition process was. No, actually, I'm not. All right.
There were spreadsheets. There were literally spreadsheets on like, does she snore? Does she snore was one of the things. It's crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
The deeper I got into the history research of this, I mean, could you imagine what Stephen Moffat would have done with this?
Well, hey, Doctor Who. He still knows Doctor Who's a family show, but yeah,
that's right. It would be subtle in a Moffat kind of way. It would, there would be lots of jokes with two meanings.
Well, I will say there, like for a family show, there were. There's one thing that I would say in this particular serial that I wouldn't say is surprising because it's pretty mild. They didn't hold back on the violence in Doctor Who, but the bit where Barbara is taken, terrorized in the Cave of Eyes, and they're playing dice to see who's going to kill her. That's pretty dark, just totally to hear it talked about. And yes, she's fine. She's rescued at the last minute. But you sort of shudder to think in a more mature scripted show, like what sort of terrible horrors might have been unleashed on her. So there's that. There's also, I would say, and this isn't part of it, but it's interesting you bring up the idea of like sex and relationships, and I wanted to focus a little bit on like Susan and Ping Cho. And they have this really deep friendship that clearly manifests. They're together, obviously for weeks, and they're very fond of each other. And they say that in the script, and that becomes a plot point, as I described earlier. And it's all fine and wholesome, and there isn't really a lot of hints of it going deeper than that. But I would think if this was made today, particularly with what we've seen in Doctor Who recently, particularly with Jodie Whittaker, or rather the 13th Doctor and Yaz, you might go a little further with it. And not just hint at, but maybe even make it even more clear it's deeper than just friendship.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Marco Polo is, yes, there is the fact that most of the actors are in the equivalent of yellowface. Yes, there's there are attitudes at the time. There's unfortunately, the Doctor talks about that Chinese girl. I don't trust these Chinese. I think he says at one point. But on the whole, Marco Polo is a very, very progressive story. It really emphasizes the fact that the Mongol Empire was actually, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiple religions. One of the reasons Marco Polo was there was that, his uncle and his father were supposed to come back and bring 100 priests with them, because the Khan wanted to incorporate Christianity into his empire as well, because he already had like all of these other gods, all of these other religions, and that was the Mongol attitude. Hey, the more gods, the merrier. So there's that sort of progressive attitude, and the big question about, like, basically the Doctor and his friends are immigrants, right? There's the whole question of, like, they're strangers. How do we treat them? So that's a big part of it. But also, to your point about Susan and Ping Cho, like, it is a central part of the plot, the fact that she is a child bride, that this is bad. This is bad. And I just love that the part at the start where Susan and Ping Cho are just getting to know each other. And there's this great little line back and forth that's almost Moffat-y, where she said, I'll just read it verbatim. Susan says, is your fiancé handsome? The man you're going to marry. Ping Cho, I'd never seen him. Susan, what? Ping Cho, the marriage has been arranged by my family. I know only 2 things about him. What are they? He is a very important man. That's a good start. And he's 75 years old.
Yeah.
End of scene.
She's flabbergasted.
Yeah, end of scene. And I love that. It's like yes, it's still a family show. But they make it very clear this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
At Ping Cho's, we must save her. Like, that's almost as important as getting the TARDIS back.
Yeah, there's a bit later where I think Marco even asks everyone on the TARDIS team, like, are you opposed to this? And there's like, yeah, that's not good. Yeah, it's interesting. I got to give it to Doctor Who to sort of trying to both sort of have its cake and eat it too, do the historical with maybe, not distance, but trying to be a little teaching about it, but also giving their characters license to be themselves and be modern. Susan's, I gotta say, like, this is a great episode for Caroline Ford. I think she not only looks great, she has that very believable relationship with Ping Cho. I will say this: she is the best screamer of the Hartnell era. Like, she screams, wow! Like, and you kind of you need that for this period of Doctor Who, and because Barbara, she can scream, but no one screams quite as well as Caroline Ford. So
wow!
So that's that. That's good.
I do like the fact that they're 2 teenagers across time kind of bonding.
Yeah.
Susan does get a bit weird, though, I have to be said, where she talks about Venus randomly at one point, like she's a Venus hipster. And Ping Cho says she doesn't know where Venus is. I don't. Surely the TARDIS translation circuits that are translating literally everything here,
right,
even when the TARDIS is far away, would identify Venus as the morning star or the evening star. Like, everyone knows Venus. Come on. So that's a bit of a weird bit.
I do like, I like that Susan's a bit alien here, even more than I think she ends up being in later scripts. Like, she says the word fab at one point.
Yeah.
Which I like, because it makes her modern, but she's also a little bit clueless modern, so it sort of makes her a little bit alien too, because she says at one point, oh, it's just a word we use on Earth. Or actually,
yes, fab. What is that, Susan? Well, it means wonderful. It's a verb.
That's the other thing.
Is it a verb? We use on Earth, and we're on Earth. She knows we're on Earth. What the hell?
She's clearly only stood out to her science and history teachers, not her language arts teacher.
Well, yeah, I think rule number 2: Susan lies about language.
Right.
I think we're definitely getting the sense here that she might be an unreliable narrator when it comes to making up the term TARDIS.
Yeah. So you touched on earlier a little bit on sort of what is sort of de facto yellowface, and I think you're right. And well, obviously you're right. I mean, this is sort of just how they did things. But I will say this: I was not as bothered by it here as I might be in looking at Talons of let's say Talons of Weng-Chiang.
Yes,
which is in a different era and makes racism part of the story in some ways good, but it's a little confused because of the time it was made, and there's full on prosthetic like yellowface and Talons of Weng-Chiang, whereas here it's most of the characters are Asian, And so there isn't the same sort of opportunity for the script to fall on top of itself with regard to trying to make some point about racism, but done in sort of a more racist time, which confuses the whole thing, which I think is what sort of Talon sort of suffers from. Whereas here, they're just characters. And luckily, most of them, as far as I can tell, aren't caricatures. There is a little bit at the end. I think it's one of the characters that does a over-the-top sort of Asian accent, which is really kind of unfortunate. But that's the only time I was sort of like, it was like nails on a chalkboard for me. The rest of the time, like particularly Tagana, who's a great character, and he's just kind of made to look sort of different, and he's obviously a white person playing the role, but you're just kind of going with it. So So in other words, like I think this works. Given
the multicultural nature, given the constrictions of the time, the habits of the time, but also given the multicultural nature of the Mongol Empire, like it does. It was not out of the ordinary for example, to have Marco Polo, a European, act as a minister of the Khan. Like it was definitely. It absorbed a lot of different cultures. It had Christian cultures already. It was just the fact that, it had like the Orthodox Christians lived in the Mongol Empire, and Persian Christian sects were there. But like nobody had ever heard of like the Pope and the people of the Pope. That's why the Khan was so excited to meet Marco Polo's father and uncle. So it kind of, you can stretch it a little bit and say you could see all these. The guy who plays Kublai Khan is a Czech actor. Weirdly, like it's and it's directed by Waris Hussein. Like it is Doctor Who in a very sort of multicultural sense. Even if they're not quite hitting the need to have more Asian actors in this, they did at least get Xenia Merton, who by all accounts would really acquitted herself well in the acting here in this picture. Yeah. And a lot of the story lies on her shoulders. Like you had to really sympathize with her.
How did you like essentially how the thing turned out with the Doctor playing backgammon with Kublai Khan? And
that, that seemed very New Who.
Right?
A
little bit.
Well, there's that wonderful scene where they're sort of totting up the Doctor's winnings so far. And I think it's like the a year's income from Burma is one of them. There's like several elephants' teeth. It's just a wonderful. And then when the Doctor loses the final game unexpectedly, I did really like that. Mm-hmm. It's like they're really a reversal that you wouldn't necessarily see in New Who, right? Mm-hmm. That the Doctor loses it, and then he just gets a piece of the Khan's currency, paper currency, or actually the currency was more often printed on silk. And I like that I could just sort of imagine William Hartnell walking away looking disappointed with this little piece of silk in his hand.
Well, I think you're dead on. Like, I like so many of the choices here. Like the choice of him just losing the last game. And I like that you don't need to explain it. Like they don't have to go like, even though it sort of stretches credulity a little bit that he wins and wins and wins and wins and then loses one, you almost might feel as a writer, do I need to make it so that he cheats or something happens or he gets distracted and depict that? No, you don't. He just loses, and you need that for the story. And I'm invested enough that I'm just going to go with it. Yeah. So that happens.
I like that. I like the fact that Kublai Khan turns out like it is a bit of a a surprise that he turns out to be this sympathetic old dude who's got gout. Which fact check true. Kublai Khan did have gout.
They went to the corner, and got that one. But go on.
Yeah. I also like that they're initially going to Shang-Tu. Do you know what Shang-Tu is, Pete? I didn't until.
No, tell me what Shang-Tu is, Chris.
Shang-Tu is Xanadu.
Oh, there you go.
In Xanadu did Kublai Khan. Yes. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure-dome decree where Elf the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. That is my favorite poem.
That looks like you memorized that.
Well, the first bit, I just knew it. It's one of my favorite poems in the English language. Nice. I think it's a beautiful thing. Famously produced by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in an opium haze. But he was actually reading a book that was replicating an account that goes back to Marco Polo. Another thing I wouldn't have known. Thank you for Sidney Newman and his educational mandate for Doctor Who. I've learned so much this week. I've learned what Xanadu actually was. I've learned that the description of it actually comes from Marco Polo himself. I've learned that it was called Shang-Tu. I'm super excited about everything that I learned here. And I remember thinking, like, going into this, oh, Kubla Khan's in it. Shame I can't talk about the poem Kubla Khan. Well, it turns out I can. There's a direct connection. So it does they talk about they're going to the Summer Palace in Shang-Tu.
Right.
And then there's this last minute turn of like, oh, actually the Emperor's in Peking. Now Beijing, of course. Which was true. He would literally break down the Summer Palace. It was this giant tent, I think called the Cane Palace, like because they used bamboo canes to stick it up. And but that like had 400 rooms. It was this amazing temporary structure in this pleasure garden in Xanadu, or I think Chengdu as Marco Polo calls it. It's ruined now. But it's also a UNESCO site. It really existed. But yeah, he would break it down at the end of August and go back to Peking. So I love that they got that detail accurate too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I learned plenty too. I learned that bamboo explodes with a loud bang. You light it up. I also learned how bandits try to get you when you're in the desert by cutting your water and then waiting until you're weak and then attacking. Smart.
Yeah, and there are special riders that can go 300 miles a day. Like that's
right.
Interesting plot point that they throw in.
That's really impressive. Yeah, I hope they stop those horses stop to drink every now and then.
Well, they change horses every 3 miles, which is the interesting thing. I don't know. Damn. Yeah, I don't know. They had this support network of riders. I'm not sure how it worked, but
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
The Silk Road was definitely not one road. It was a vast network, and there were these oases and camps and temporary structures, and there was a lot of trading and horses all over the place. And yeah, really, really interesting time for Doctor Who to visit. And again, really just wish they'd, my one note on Marco Polo is like, don't do it in 1964. Do it in 2024.
Yeah.
When we've got the budget.
Let's do it. Hey, Disney Plus.
Yeah, call us.
Yeah, I really like the end. Again, I think I said earlier, like it lets Hartnell come alive. It lets him sort of take command. I'm glad you brought up New Who because I think there are a couple of things that really are echoed in New Who, particularly with Matt Smith. I mean, there's the bit I think at the end of is it the end of episode 1 where he's just laughing that he has no idea what he's going to do.
Yes.
That echoes the Doctor's wife to me. Like, there's the bit where Matt Smith's like, I really have no idea what I'm going to do. And he's kind of laughs. That's a new feeling. Well, it's not that new, Doctor, if you think back to this one.
Yes, rule number 1, the Doctor forgets every other time that he didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and like you say, all that stuff when almost losing, or he does lose to Kubla Khan eventually. But I just like that the structure of it, that is the Doctor as the sort of at least intellectual power center of the group, and then sort of essentially in a lot of ways the most powerful person on among our leads. Of course, is the person to go sort of mano a mano with the Emperor. Again, it isn't a bad guy at all.
Yeah, it's perfect because he is sort of the sclerotic Emperor of the TARDIS himself.
Yeah,
like that's he is in a Kubla Khan role in his own kingdom. And he has captured these teachers. Let us not forget they're kind of hostages themselves at this stage. They're a bit Marco Polo-ish in their indenturedness to the Doctor.
But I think again, it's surprisingly like I guess they're figuring out what Doctor Who is still at this point. So why there's so much experimenting. But if you think about it, the lead in this story is Marco. Right? Like there's nobody, like, I mean, Ian's the only one that sort of comes close because of his relationship with him. But like the Doctor's, his pieces out of episode 2 is pretty ineffective throughout until the end. And this is, it's really Marco Polo's story. I mean, it's very apt that that's the name. That's the thing they're exploring, and that he's the narrator. I mean, he is the lead of this episode of Doctor Who.
That's the other reason why I say do this in 2024, not 1964. Come on, Doctor Who, you can erase your own past and write over it and give us an actual version of Marco Polo that is existing is safe and saved, or maybe just remake it. I don't know. Maybe ask AI to animate it. But the fact that you can play so much with that narration, and you would play with it so much more today. The meta textual nature of it, really, the fact that we still don't know a lot of truth from fiction in Marco's story today, as it was recounted. It went through so many filters, and he was trying to kind of impress a lot of people. And there are verifiable lies in it, but also a lot of verifiable truths. So if we'd played with this sort of sense of like Marco himself saying, I don't know what's real anymore, by the way, echoing what the 14th Doctor says, right, in the first teaser trailer. I don't know who I am. Like that sense of like unreality. What is real? What is true? What is not? Is the Doctor lying? Well, yeah. And what does rule number 1 actually mean? I don't think we've ever fully explored the implications of what the Doctor lies means. Like, has he met half the historical figures that he talks about? He says in this serial that he's never met Genghis Khan, but then that's like contradicted, I think, in some audio or comic book or book story later. So it's like,
well, the master claims he was him, but that's clearly a lie in the TV movie. So I can't remember if there's I'm sure there are other Genghis Khan references somewhere, but
there's so much that we can't know as fact about Marco Polo and his adventures, even though it's like the fact that Marco Polo didn't actually write in this sort of clean narration style that we get in this story. He would conflate a lot of stuff. He would talk about a city when he's going there once, but he'd actually gone there twice. Like, he just doesn't. He's maddeningly non-chronological, and one might say he's a randomizer.
It's definitely a choice in this case. So in this particular version of Marco Polo, he's very thoughtful. I think Mark Eden's quite good because it might not be as historically accurate. And to your point, there's an opportunity here to either remake this or revisit it with maybe a more fabulous version of Marco Polo. But given the choices
playing with that sense,
I think he's good. He's kind of like, he's basically this steady leader who has people on both sides trying to pull him, right? There's like Tigana, don't trust them, they're bad, they're wizards, blah, blah, blah. I'm really working against you secretly. And then everyone else who's the TARDIS team who's basically saying like, hey, this other dude's bad. No, go with us. And he's always choosing the middle path, right? He's a political operator. So that, and that's very realistic. Like, I like the point. It's smart writing where the girls come to him with essentially eyewitness testimony, like Tigana's bad, and here's the proof he knew this place, and he said he didn't, and he's like, that's it, that's your evidence, come on, like, what are you talking about? No, that's not how this works, ladies. And no, it's right, it isn't how it works.
You need more evidence. I mean, it's continuing our Gallifrey Law and Order theme from the War Games. You do. This is almost a procedural, right? You do need to come back to the police chief with better evidence and, tell a straight story about how you found the key and where you found it. Marco's cross-examining Ian a lot.
Yeah, and he's basically the central tension between the Tigana and the TARDIS team. He's the one navigating it throughout, and keeping us, going one side or the other. Like, every now and then you think he's going to go further with the TARDIS team and finally, point at Tigana, get rid of him, etc. But no, something happens. There's a betrayal, and he's no dummy. Like, it's very believable the way he does it throughout. Like, when he has the key. And he challenges Ian on where did you get the key, and Ian is like, well, I took it, but he doesn't. Basically, he's trying to protect the girls, and he's Marco's no dummy. I know you did it, dude, and now you're lying to me, and now I'm supposed to go with what you say. Like, it's not how it's going to go.
How can I trust you, stranger? Which is such a theme of Marco Polo's own life. Which is wonderful.
I will say it's not really a nitpick, but it is like when Ian goes to him with the truth and is like, we're time travelers, we're from the future. And Marco obviously disbelieves him. But if you really want to convince him, dude, you're a science teacher. There's a host of things you could show, with just simple sort of science experiments that because you are from the 20th century, that he would be convinced or even more inclined to believe it at least, but he kind of just sort of shrugs.
And all you've got is condensation and bamboo. Yeah,
a circuit or something, like, or whatever, or show boils. I don't know, like.
Oh yeah, so he does point out that water boils at lower temperatures and higher altitudes. Do I have that right? Or is it higher temperatures at higher altitudes? I can never remember.
It's lower because the pressure is very low, and so it boils at a lower temperature. Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's something Marco brings up and marvels at in his in the book of his adventures. That water does boil very quickly when he's up there on the roof of the world. So you can sort of see how the writer thought, oh, well, I'll just have a science teacher sitting next to him at the fire explaining how this can be. But yeah, if you're going to do that, commit to the bit and really use your, have it be Chekhov's science teacher. It has to go off in the last scene. There has to be some big payoff where he does something Walter White-ish, some sort of great chemistry experiment to blow stuff up. I don't know. It's definitely a lost opportunity there for more education. But I think it was so well handled. I wanted more.
Well, maybe
I will say, Pete. Before I know we're heading into the territory of the four questions. I know what you were going to do, but I will say, from reading the script, it seems a little obvious that Tigana is like the bad dude. Like Marco Polo just comes off as an idiot and a patsy. So tell me, from actually listening to it, is Tigana kind of like, has he got that sort of silky smooth charisma where you're like, oh, I can believe that people would just believe this dude?
I think it's more that he's intimidating. I think because he is in this position of his, he is very resolute about what he believes and what consequences will befall anyone who doesn't sort of go with his version of things.
So he's a bit General Smythe-ish then.
Yeah. So I think Marco is a political operator. He's not fully trusting Tigana, but he also it's not that he's full on intimidated by him and is scared what he's going to do to him if he calls him out. He's scared of the situation of Tigana as the bad guy and then what the implications of that are. And he would rather see the world through these rose-colored glasses where he's going to give Tigana every chance to just because that if he commits fully to that Tigana's the bad dude, that's bad on so many levels.
He'd have to extricate himself very carefully
and basically
that situation.
I feel in Tigana's performance, and I think the guy's name is it something Nesbitt, Jordan Nesbitt or something like that. I forgot what it is. He's good.
Darren Nesbitt. Darren Nesbitt. Yeah.
That's what he seems to emphasize with his every line. Like, are you really gonna call me out on this? Because you know what happens if you do. And
he plays a Gestapo officer in Where Eagles Dare.
Oh, there you go.
He's kind of well known as being a villain, and also has played a drag queen in 2018.
Oh wow! Look at that,
and is still alive at the age of 87.
Oh, awesome! Cool. Let's call him up.
Yeah, we could have had him on for this. Sorry, Tigana. Sorry, Darren Nesbitt. All right, is it time?
It's time to take a little detour on this Silk Road and encounter on the path the 4 questions to Doomsday.
Doomsday, of course, a small Chinese town on the edge of the Mongol Empire.
Oh, wow.
No, sorry. 4 questions.
Well,
on
it's
the
not
Silk Road
Doomsday. No. Doom's the possessive. Less said about that, but the better, I think.
Yes.
The first question, of course, why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, the randomizer is a cheeky chappy. We gendered the randomizer as female last week, so I'm going to call him male this week, just for randomness' sake. And when you said, Pete, last week that you wanted no more war, we'd had too much war with the war games. What does the randomizer do? It gives us a literal warlord, from the warlord of the war games to Warlord Tigana in Marco Polo.
Of course.
Yeah,
there it is. And in this one, they prevent a war.
Yes.
Seemingly. So, no wars. Lots of violence, no wars.
But I like the easy lift that it was from a just reading the script perspective. I like that I could do that, but also that it sent me down these wonderful rabbit holes. I really appreciate Randomizer for that. I did sort of think of a Saranga conundrum connection, but
A Saranga
but just
connection.
a Saranga connection, which might have been a better title. Well, just a kind of a connection to the Jodie era in general, which is like her historicals were kind of like they veered back in this direction, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
they felt more
showcased
educational,
more,
for sure.
Yeah. And they showcase these same values of multiculturalism that exists around the edges, admittedly, but it's definitely there in Marco Polo, which is basically a story of how do we treat strangers and immigrants.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. My connection was on one of your observations in the War Games, which is that is a stellar TARDIS team. The Zoe, Jamie, and Troughton. One of the best ever. I would say certainly the best of the Troughton era. And I alluded to this earlier. Experiencing Marco Polo was so pleasing on a level because I love this TARDIS team. I love the originals. I love Ian, Barbara, and Susan. I think they work really, really well. It honestly, like when I go back to watch episodes with them, it really doesn't feel like a crowded TARDIS in the same way that Jodie's TARDIS does, I think. And obviously the episodes have more room to stretch out, and that's probably a big reason why. But I think this is the best TARDIS team of the Hartnell era, and it's interesting to bookend this black and white era of Doctor Who with the War Games and one of these very, very early episodes with the two, in my view, greatest TARDIS teams of each of those Doctors. So that was my
I really think that. So you did actually mention An Unearthly Child last week as somewhere the randomizer might go. I think the randomizer may have been trying to get close. It may have also been trying to get to Edge of Destruction. Very, very TARDIS centric. And just sort of missed. But I think
it always
you're right.
takes us to where we need to go, Chris.
That is true. But I think you're right about the TARDIS team of this era, that it was generally aiming for. I think the dynamic is super interesting because you've got two Earth people and two Gallifreyans. You've got two people who know the TARDIS inside out, two people who know their stuff, their history and their science inside out. There's kind of a natural divide between them, but also there's a divide of like, Susan is much closer to her teachers than the Doctor is. And it's a very interesting dynamic. And invariably one of them sort of has a weaker story than the other. So it's really, to your point last week about how great a TARDIS team is when you have two other people in it.
Yeah, it's true.
It's kind of what we have de facto with these four. Like invariably one of them is sitting out for whatever reason.
Right.
Often it's Hartnell. But three does seem to be the magic number for, people in the TARDIS, people on an adventure. I was thinking about that when re-listening to the War Games podcast, and also thinking about how great Rory and Amy were, to my mind. That was perhaps the greatest TARDIS team of the modern era.
Yeah.
When you had that, because there was such opportunity to play off each other.
Well, even some of the better Capaldi episodes with Bill and Nardole, I'm trying to think of. Yeah, like when you have three in the TARDIS, use it. And, sometimes the single companion works just because you're trying to do more. Like I knew who you have less time to do things. And you couldn't, I don't know if you would have as good an episode of, say, something, I'm just picking Vincent and the Doctor, for example, if there were two, right? So sometimes that room for the story to stretch out is really needed. But if you have two, you just have more to work with, and particularly when they have contrasting personalities and things to do, and maybe there's even some real conflict there, which I think they played up a little bit with Rose and Mickey, just to finish the thought, because obviously there was like relationship tension there, so that was really cool. As short-lived as that was, it was only like a few episodes.
And as short-lived as Rose and Adam was, right? That was also playing with the tension there. But the fact that it sort of gives everyone has someone to latch onto, the way that Ian has Marco Polo to latch onto. The Doctor eventually latches onto the Emperor. Susan, obviously, with Ping Cho. Barbara, antagonistically latches onto to Tagana, as in terms of being being kidnapped. way
well,
the evil scheme
luckily,
is. Yeah.
Jacqueline Hill had a lot more to do in the Aztecs. And so she definitely got her share of stuff eventually in these historicals, as she wasn't served super well here.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. This is we're only at the second question.
That's right. So much to talk about.
And the second question is, what if the evil plot had succeeded? All right. So obviously the evil plot is Tigana's.
Unless it's Marco Polo's.
Okay.
I mean, let's not forget, Marco steals the TARDIS first.
Oh, yeah, he does. That's true. He steals it first. So which one do you want to do?
He steals it because he's trying to buy his freedom. I think we can do them both. And I think you can, say that it would kind of be the same result in both cases, which is that a Mongol warlord, whether it be the ruler of China, Kublai Khan, or the, Tigana's warlord, Khan to the north, whose name I forget.
New guy, I think.
Yeah, there we go. New guy.
New guy.
Hey, it's the new guy.
Oh my God.
Which is what we will all be saying when the Mongol Khan, known as New Guy, takes over the TARDIS and rules all of history with it. Hey, it's the new guy. Bow down, kowtow, quickly. Because I think that you could posit the idea that these courts of the Khans in this age were advanced enough, and they really were some of the most powerful and enlightened and civilized and cosmopolitan places in the world. And it was the largest contiguous land empire in history. It beat the Roman Empire and in many ways was more civilized than the Romans, but also had that Roman value of let's bring on all the gods, more the merrier. So it's not beyond the bounds of belief to say if they got their hands on the TARDIS, and presuming they also have the key and can get in and can start to deduce things from it. I don't know, does the TARDIS become like the Rosetta Stone of time travel? And we have time-traveling Mongol lords. I mean, holy cow, RTD, if you're looking for a spin-off to throw those Disney Plus billions into, this might be it. Time-traveling Mongol warlords. Time-traveling Khans. Get the Dothraki and a TARDIS. Imagine the possibilities.
Well, that's huge. That's way bigger stakes than just history changing, because that's what kind of like I was thinking it would be. If Tigana's plot succeeds, Kublai Khan's assassinated, and then
that part.
New Guy's army comes in and they sort of take over. I don't know. Presumably, then history changes and there's a more violent
my
period?
my research ran out after Kublai Khan, so I'm not sure what happens next. But there were definitely periods of uprising and revolt. And
ultimately,
and Khans weren't always in charge.
Yeah, and obviously the empire that you talked about eventually, fell, and I don't know if a lot changes because the history is so long ago, and lots of things. The empire would collapse regardless. There would be
East Asian history experts. Please write in. Leave a comment below.
Yeah. But if Kublai Khan dies earlier, essentially, and this more violent faction has control over China, does that have a bigger a negative impact on, say, Asian history or Chinese history? Probably. I would think it would. But then you kind of, in a Doctor Who context, well, wait a minute, can history like that change? I think New Who and most of Doctor Who since this period of Doctor Who has said, yes, it can. Whereas just 2 episodes later, or 2 stories later, they were saying, no, it can't, right? Like basically Barbara, the whole thing about the Aztecs is that, spoiler alert, Barbara wants to change history and make them more civilized. And it just kind of doesn't work because now, but that said, is there a literal law of time, like a physical law of time that says you can't do it? Subsequent Doctor Who would say no, that it's more like it's inadvisable to change history, and would then time sort of fix itself if history was changing in the same way that sort of it worked against the Doctor, presumably in The Waters of Mars, right? Like it was changing this fixed point in time, and then time itself was sort of working against him. At least that's what sort of he was saying. I mean, he might have been being figurative. But would that happen here? I don't know.
Well, would that happen here? I think what we have to consider coming so soon after the War Games is that the Time Lords would eventually catch up with this Type 40 TARDIS of theirs. And you would, before the Mongols got too far in using it to rule all of time and space, they would possibly, freeze the whole situation. Maybe put the Mongols in a time loop. Maybe put Earth in a time loop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we get banished and nixed, and the Doctor doesn't have anywhere to play. They pick him up and they pick Susan up, and maybe Susan goes on trial, and we find out that she was this, I don't know, great mastermind who, her grandfather was just the front for the operation.
Secret Life of Susan Foreman. Damn.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I like all your high stakes stories that are resulting in this. I'm like, does history change? Who cares, man? Time.
RTG, call me.
All right. More questions. We have to get to the third question, which is, of course, where is the Clara Splinter? What's she doing? Where is she? She's lots of opportunities here.
Wait, you're not going to read out the boilerplate about how she was splintered in time after the name of the Doctor and is featured in all of the Doctor stories, and we use her to solve plot holes? I think I just did it.
You just did it. We're good.
All right. Well, I just said that, so now you got to say where you think Clara was.
Well, my initial thing is like she's trying on those boots in the Himalayas, like big boots. She's got her Timberlands. She's walking around. She's got her big fur coat. But that's not really necessary because, as we said earlier, Tagana is probably the guy who's walking around, and that's why he saw the TARDIS materialize. He saw them come out of it. So that sets the whole thing in motion. My thought is she is the worst backgammon coach ever. And basically, she was the person in Peking who trained Kublai Khan on the game so that he would just lose and lose and lose and lose to the Doctor. But of course, she gave him some secret weapon to pull out. So she's either the worst or the best, right? She's like lull them into this sense of security and then pull out this killer move that will always win. So that's a possibility too. She's actually really the best backgammon coach ever, but one or the other. She's basically had a big influence on that final game.
I love it. Similar idea, but the biggest Deus Ex Machina or Clara Ex Machina in the story is the fact that Ping Cho's husband just dies because he's ingested Quicksilver. Now, that gives an opportunity for there to be a character just off screen who's an apothecary who is recommending this Quicksilver remedy to this 75-year-old man, perhaps with a lot of winks and nods about how he needs to perform well on his wedding night. You know what I'm saying? Better take this potion. I call it Viagra.
It's 13th century Viagra. That's so funny.
I mean, there were aphrodisiacs of a very, very long history, right? So I can totally believe that she's the one, killing off Ping Cho's husband-to-be because the TARDIS team are so inept they can't do it themselves. So she has to take care of the 75-year-old dude.
That's it. There it is.
Yeah.
Boom.
Either that or she's still in her Time Lord guise and she actually hung out within the Type 40 and she's actually fixing it in the background. And she's she's going through a lot of problems, but if the Doctor would just stop taking them to different places and pulling components out, and, she could get this thing properly fixed. She's yet to install the swimming pool.
Or she just broke the thing at the outset.
Yeah, she's going around the TARDIS breaking everything, which would also explain Edge of Destruction.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. It's her. She's a TARDIS troublemaker.
Yep.
I'm into that. All right, it is time for the fourth question, the last question, the only question that matters for Marco Polo. What did we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has 5 ratings. There's the Dalek, which is what we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to a not-so-good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a not-so-great episode, but, at least they tried something. At least we learned something. the Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best, and the rarely used Fixed Point in Time, which is a rating we give to stories that are essentially unrateable, often for reasons of nostalgia, but sometimes for other reasons.
Pete, do you want to go first? Because I think mine might be a bit of a surprise.
Sure. I'm calling this one a Dalek, as you could tell. As I said at the outset, I think it's a very enjoyable episode. It sets the template for historicals in Doctor Who. After this, you sort of see several adventures where they go into a time in history and get involved with either historical figures or pseudo-historical figures. And it's done in an educational way and a dramatic way at the same time. And often it really, really works. The last historical we did was The Smugglers, which is probably the one that they kind of fell out of that formula the most, I would say. Like in that it's more of kind of a random tale set in a certain period, as opposed to like very clear historical figures you want to explore. And I think it sort of shows why The Smugglers doesn't work as well as Marco Polo and other adventures like it. I think this is kind of the way to do it, though. But very solid, good story, strong characters. It's a shame it's missing, but those telesnaps, they sure look fab.
They do. And yeah, so it's a Dalek, I imagine, in sort of like 13th century, Chinese garb.
Yeah, it's got a nice blue tunic on that Dalek with some Asian lettering. Yeah, it's all good.
Yes, love it. Love it. I'm actually going to give this the rarely used Fixed Point in Time. And the reason being, so I think there are problems with it. We didn't get into, but we sort of touched on a lot of them. I think that the casting, even though what they did at the time, it's an issue. I think that it shouldn't have been 7 episodes. I think it easily have been condensed. I believe there is a telesnap version where they condense it down to 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. Just sort of 30 minutes?
Kind of summarize it.
It's like not a lot longer than my TLDW.
Yeah. So it had issues, and, reading the script like this, it does come across as a bit basic as a story, and it does work. I also, like, researching Marco Polo and thinking about what else could have been done. Like, I'm inclined to be more critical of it, but I can't be, because you just can't. You can't hate on this. I don't think it's a Professor Hater. I don't think it's quite a Dalek. I'm tempted to, if it were to fall between anything, it would be between Fixed Point and Time Dalek. But I think just because it's starting the whole ball rolling, like you can't, like, Doctor Who gets a gimme on this. Like it just. You get to call a mulligan on your first historical, and one that just sets the tone, sets the template in so many things, and has odd choices in other areas. I think it just, you just got to say this is Fixed Point in Time. And also, I just don't think we can judge it because we can't see it. We literally, yes, telesnaps give us a good idea, but as one of the only 3 serials in Doctor Who history for which there's not one single scene surviving, I think that might make it unjudgeable as well. But combine that with the fact that it is so early and they don't really know what they're doing, I think Fixed Point in Time is fully applicable here.
Okay, we're never letting you just read the script again. Come on, man. All right. Well, I guess I can't.
We can come back to this. We can
get you to make a decision, damn it. But no, I understand what you're saying. It's tough to judge on a lot of levels, but again, I think maybe it's a little bit my having not quite. I would say grown up, like, on watching Doctor Who in these omnibus versions, particularly seeing the whole first Doctor era in one chunk, at least the surviving stuff as it was in the 80s. I really loved, again, this TARDIS team. It's very personal to revisit it. And I was very happy to have that feeling again of, like, kind of almost seeing a new adventure with some of my favorite characters. I'd never really sat down and watched Marco Polo before, or even listened to it. I had read the novelization years and years and years ago. But I did not expect to sort of have that visceral feeling of, like, oh wow, like it's the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan, and in an adventure I haven't seen Like, it's like, that's great. I still haven't technically seen it, but I kind of felt like I did. So it was very, very good. No.
But your kids pieced out?
Yeah, my kids bailed on this
experience?
one. Yeah, I after the Smugglers, I try not to make them. I'm not inclined to make them sit through telesnap versions of things. I think it's not great on them. It sort of probably influenced me a little bit in the Smugglers, even though I stand by my rating of that one. So, and also it's 7 episodes, dude. Like, even a 4-episoder with telesnaps would be tough. 7, nah. Not happening.
Yeah, that's why I'm hesitant to say Dalek, right? Because I think, like, do we make our listeners feel like they have to sit through all 7 episodes?
Yes, we do.
Think so.
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
I would recommend, if you do it though, check out those color telesnap versions of Daily Motion. Those are pretty good. Whoever did those took some time. And
maybe we can throw some links in the show notes.
That's a great idea. I will make some in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, it is time to get back in our caravan to escape from the Khan's court improbably early in the proceedings. Everyone distracted by the duel. We're running back in. We are back at the controls of the randomizer. And the randomizer has 2 components, neither of which are on the fritz. Which is lucky for us. Pete, you have the first component, the codex. What is the codex?
The codex is a list, a spreadsheet of every single story in Doctor Who that has been broadcast on television. And it is something that we need to introduce a random element to. Chris, what is that random element?
The random element is played by random.org, a site that gives you true randomness based on atmospheric noise and the amount of snow in the sand in the Gobi Desert and snow at the roof of the world, multiplied by the number of molecules in the atmosphere, or something like that. But anyway, something better than an algorithm, which is pseudo-random, not truly random. So we're giving you true nature-based randomness here on Pull to Open, bespoke randomness. And what we do with random.org is I plug in the minimum number of 1, an unearthly child, and the maximum number of the number of stories that we've got left, which is, Pete, I believe I'm correct in saying 219?
Yes, we have reached the 200 teens. So we're 219 left. Now that we are off Marco Polo.
We are getting ever closer to the magical 1/3 of Doctor Who completed. 1/3 of it watched. Can you imagine? True. Yeah, I mean, we're probably already past the 1/4 mark, I would imagine, but not very good at fractions. But anyway, we do like to challenge the randomizer, not do math. So, Pete, what's your challenge?
It's opposite day. Take us to the future.
I like it. I'm going to say it's opposite day for me. My oppositional defiance day. I'm going to say no. Take us further back, further into the past. I say.
Whoa.
Further. Hang those who talk of less.
All right. Wow. Competing challenges. It's like Marco Polo is the randomizer now that has to take our arguments and sort of try to find the middle path.
Indeed. All right. Well, give me a countdown.
All right. Here we go. In 4, 3, 2, 1.
Fantastic.
162.
Oh my. All right.
I think that's New Who.
Yeah, it might be. Let's see. We're at barely New Who. It's the Unquiet Dead.
Wow, we did not go further into that. That was how it Marco Polo'd us. It's the past, but it's the future of the past.
Yes.
From Marco Polo. From Marco Polo to Charles Dickens, you get it all here on Pull to Open.
You get it all here every week, and you'll come on back for the Unquiet Dead. But for now, we have to bid you all adieu. Guys, this has been Pull to Open. It is a podcast. If you have not yet subscribed to this podcast, please do. And if once you do that, hey, why not go all the way with your podcast commitment and leave us a review or a rating in whatever app you are listening in. Follow us on social media. We're at Pull to Open on TikTok. We post lots of videos there all the time. We're also on Twitter at Pull to Open 63, Facebook at the same handle, Pull to Open 63, and Instagram. You guessed it, Pull to Open 63. We're on Spotify, and on Spotify, reminder, you can also not just rate the show on Spotify, you can give your voice. We just rated Marco Polo with our Pull to Open ratings. Now you can rate it yourself. Is it an Ogron? Is it a Dalek? Is it a Viscount Banger? Is it a hashish-inspired, perhaps, fixed point in time? That is all completely up to you and your call. Please vote in the Spotify app. And we will see you next time for The Unquiet Dead in the early new
See you. Yeah, see you in Cardiff, guys.